meeting that you're calling to order and the date, because I will mention to everyone we are live, being streamed to YouTube and Facebook, and recording as well, so that people can look back and view the meeting.
Okay. I'll call to order the Natural Features Protection Review Board meeting, one of our regular meetings for September 29th, 2020.
Thank you. So today we're going to be, I guess, hearing a recommendation on the amendments that the board has been working on for the Natural Features Protection Overlay District. And so we're holding it a little bit more like a public hearing, although the true public hearing will be at Plan Commission per state statute. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the staff presentation. What I wanted to mention was that, again, we're being recorded and this is streaming live. We have participants who are here on our Zoom call. Right now we have 4 participants, but I imagine there's a number of people watching us. And then the main way we're asking people, the only way people are giving us public comment, is to call into the comment line and leave a recording. And then those will be played at 2 different times during the meeting. So for the public who's wanting to provide public comment, you can call into the number. It's 269-226-6573. Again, that's 226-6573. The line was opened at 3:30 today, just before this meeting. We will keep it open through the public comment period under E, new business. So public comment period is Roman numeral 3. If you want to get your recording done by that time, then we will have those played. When you call in, you'll be able to select option 1, which is leave a message for the NFP overlay map. Or you can choose option 2, which is leave a message just as general citizen comment. And those can be left up until the citizen comment period under capital I on our agenda. So that'll be a little later after we do new business and old business. We will take general citizen comment. So again, that number, for those who want to leave a message, dial 269-226-6573. And then I will let Mitch take over and lead us through the agenda. I'll make one other note. We have, for the board members, we have Neil Conway, who's helping us field all of those calls, and we'll make sure we get those played. We have Joe he's the City of Kalamazoo logo. He's with our IT department helping us also. And then we have Beth Cheeseman here to record our minutes. So thank you to all the staff who've joined us.
Great. Yeah, thanks to the extra staff for putting everything together. And then we'll just start off with a roll call. Jamie, if you want to start with that.
Yes, Colwick.
Present.
Fuller.
Here.
Glasser.
I am here.
Leto.
Here.
McNellis. Martin.
Here.
And Sylvester.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So a motion to excuse absent board member Paul McNellis.
I'll move that we excuse Paul McNellis.
I'll second.
Support.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda is the agenda itself. So the way the agenda is laid out for today's meeting, are there any comments or otherwise can we make a motion to accept the agenda if there are no comments or additions?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion to accept the agenda moves forward. Next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the last NFP review board meeting from August 25th, 2020 that Jamie sent out. I actually had a couple of questions, and I don't need you to rehash the whole thing just because I wasn't there. But there was one section on the site development standards. I wasn't sure if I was understanding correctly, Jamie, and I wondered if you could maybe fill me in on it. It was about site development standards and visual screens and native plants. And I remember in past meetings discussing whether we were going to require developments in the NFP to use native plants or suggest. And I know there was also some discussion of whether the language could be used for broader city projects, but that for the broader city area might be nice to recommend that, but not limit people so much. So it's section K in the previous meeting agenda. So I just want to make sure I was understanding that right. Are we suggesting that in the NFP native plants would not be limited to native species, but only invasives would be required to be listed as something they couldn't use?
So you're right. In the minutes, we had discussed some amendments to the text of the development standards in the zoning code. And I have some recommendations in my presentation today that I'll cover. This one with screening does come into play. And so I can cover those in a little more detail in my presentation. I will, at that time, I'll talk about some of the options we have, because I feel like you're making a good point. We did not have all of our members with us at this last meeting. I did want to at least bring it up as a recommendation, what minimal changes that I've been hearing from the board that we may be satisfied, the board may be satisfied accepting, but again, the motion can certainly be changed, right? You can make a motion instead of approving those text amendments to, table those for a later date and not approve those. So we can talk through that during the presentation. I think we can cover that.
Okay, sounds good. I'll wait to hear about it then. Okay, any other comments on the meeting minutes from August 25th? Okay, if there are none, is there a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from August 25th?
So moved.
Support.
All right, sounds good. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion to adopt meeting minutes is approved. And new business, sounds like we'll start with staff presentation. So the new business is recommendation that the NFP review board approve amendments to natural features protection overlay district and related zoning code. And the action would be to motion to approve this amendment.
Yes, and that Mitch is the motion that, that's a recommended motion there on the agenda to guide you all. But I could see today, after we have staff presentation, some public comments, board discussion, that motion, can be as flexible and worded in the way you want to. And we can talk a little bit about those options as we have learned more about what the public's input has been and what the staff recommendation is. So with that, before we get started, I just want to triple check that Paul is not trapped in the attendee box, but he's not. So we'll see if he joins us. Again, I will let, we're going to start out with staff presentation. I want to let folks in the participating as public or watching this, if they want to leave a public comment, now is the time to do so. I will mention you should have a little bit of time also after the presentation if you'd rather hear that first. And then to leave that voice recording again, dial 269-226-6573. And I'll mention that again after the presentation. But let me try to share my screen here. Give me a moment to get it set up. All right, can everyone see that?
Not quite yet. Oh, there we go.
We're seeing the PowerPoint presentation, right? Okay, what I want to cover today is to talk a little bit about the background. My computer looks a little slow. Talk a little bit about the background and give some sort of general information about how we've gotten the map to the point that it is today, which I will admit is slightly changed, and I'll go over those changes from even last Friday. I'm actually really happy and pleased to see all of the public comment that we've had over the last few days, even up until probably in the last hour. We've had a couple of additional comments, and I think that's all really positive. But I wanted to give, for those folks in the public and then just as a board, a refresh on all the steps and phases that you all have kind of brought this project through. And so it gives people a little bit of an understanding of how parcels were selected. So if we go way back to before phase 1 of the Natural Features Protection Project even got launched, it was an idea conceived out of the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 master plan. And what city staff heard was that the city should be finding some way to identify and protect natural features throughout the city. And some of those were identified in this future land use map that you kind of see here in a hatched overlay, saying, you know, this is some of the areas where the public has said we have important features. But again, city, you go find a way to help protect these areas, both identify and protect these areas. So in 2000, at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, that's what city staff set out to do. The city commission approved a moratorium because there was development pressure in a particular part of the city, and city commission wanted to allow staff the ability to craft these rules with the public's input in sort of an unbiased way, just give a little bit of breathing room to get this done. So for 6 months, the city worked with an advisory committee of folks from the community and experts throughout the community to help develop just the rules that apply, right? Those development rules that apply within the overlay map. And so we started working on, you know, what are the sort of development considerations that a project has to make when they're proposing new development or a redevelopment. Maybe it's demolition and building something new, or maybe it's an addition, some sort of change to the way the land is being used. And so we have in our zoning code all of those rules, right? They kind of focus on several different natural features. They're oftentimes, you know, setbacks from water, preserving certain parts of a woodland, not being allowed to just remove any tree. There's certain species, special species and sizes that need to be sort of designed around, right? And if there's no other choice but to remove that tree, then it needs to be replaced, some of those types of rules. The standards also require more stormwater treatment in these areas because they're near and around natural features. We need to be protective of that. So again, the project doesn't limit, or it maybe limits, it doesn't disallow new development. It's asking the development to design and build in such a way that it can be as sensitive as possible to the surrounding natural features. And so those rules were adopted by the city commission in June of 2019. And then we put together an NFP review board. So this is the body here tonight that you guys meet at least once per month, and you review these cases, these site plans that are coming forward to make some modifications to properties that are in the overlay district. And what we knew we needed to do was what we were deeming phase 2 of NFP, which was to really take a hard look at that map that was, you know, kind of sketched out on our future land use map in the master plan, and really look at where we may have missed natural features in the city. And to do that, it kind of involved 3 different groups of people. And so here on this slide, you can see we're really using the NFP review board as that public body that has a lot of expertise in this area and can sort of inform and give us staff guidance on where we apply this natural features overlay map. And then we also knew we needed some technical expertise. And so we had the opportunity to partner with Western Michigan University, the geography department, and we had a graduate student who did an internship for credit and then had access to lab help and faculty to really help us decide how do we gather data and how do we analyze it and apply it in a way that we can get a map that we feel like points us toward the parcels that have some of these natural features, have some of the most important natural features in the city. And then of course it was, planning staff, that's the department this was run out of, and we kind of acted as a liaison to the different groups. So even from that early map in the master plan, we knew that we didn't even have all of the parcels in the city that are adjacent to or contain water bodies. And we knew that was one of those really, I guess for lack of a better word, low-hanging fruit, right? We wanted to make sure that all of the parcels that are adjacent to water throughout the city, I'll say water and wetlands throughout the city, were included on the map. And so we were able to use hydrology layer and national wetlands inventory wetlands maps and identify those parcels that were located around water bodies and wetlands. One of the other features we took a look at that took a bit more work was how to determine slope and then how to look at that and decide what is sort of critical slope that needs to be protected. And so we did have publicly available this digital elevation map. And so we could kind of see where, you can see it here on the left, right? You can kind of see where slope is all throughout the city, certainly around the Kalamazoo River Valley here. The river kind of comes through the city this way. And then we definitely see where tributaries and such come through the city and connect up to the Kalamazoo River on both the east and the west sides of the city. What we needed to do was be able to transform this data into a raster format that you see here on the right, and then be able to overlay that so we know exactly what parcels those slopes intersect with. And what you see in red here are slopes that are anywhere from 20 to 40% grade or higher. So you can see it's a lot of area throughout the city, and then the green shows you where the existing NFP overlay district applies. We also heard from the board that we needed to consider woodlands in some way, and we were able to use some publicly available data from the USDA. This one is from 2018, so it shows what the woodland canopy looks like throughout the city, and you can see it's quite scattered, right? Denser in some areas. Certainly we've got the center of the city proper downtown, which has not a lot of tree coverage. That extends north, especially into some of our most industrial areas. So that's definitely on the north side. We have a lot of industry. It stretches down along the Kalamazoo into the southeast quadrant. You can't quite see it. It got cut off here, but all of Davis Creek area of the city is a bit more industrial. In Western Michigan University's main campus really hops out here at us. But other than that, in a lot of our city blocks, we have quite a bit of tree canopy. That's not to say we don't have a lot of development under it though, right? It's a canopy that's been growing up for 70 or more years. So we do have a development kind of around there, but you can definitely see where we have more density in some of these patches. And so how to sort of meld these all together is that we started looking for areas where there was slope and woodlands that came together. And we did also some ground truthing. A lot of it was like a desktop exercise, but the idea was, just from the knowledge of the board and with our interns' help, we were able to kind of double check and confirm, are some of these parcels that are popping up saying that they have, both slope and woodlands? Are they adjacent to water? Are they adjacent to a wetland? Is that wetland still there? We were just kind of looking to see, we should exclude places that are already heavily developed and all the natural features are perhaps gone. And so a lot of those parcels got plucked out. And what we were left with was a map that you're seeing here. So The orange is showing you where the current overlay district exists. And so all of those parcels are already fall under the NFP development rules if they're to bring a project forward. What was added was, what is proposed to be added would be all of these blue areas. And that was from that sort of data informed analysis and a lot of the board direction, right? We heard that the board wanted to, think about areas that are undeveloped and are under perhaps threat of new development. Areas that were maybe larger parcels versus very small chopped up parcels, and places where we saw multiple natural features come together. And then I'll also say, we added parcels in sort of a ring around as a buffer to preserves, so publicly used preserves. So you can see this kind of in the southwest quadrant of the city. We have kind of a ring of parcels near Asylum Lake, and also the Western Michigan University property to the south, which also borders the preserve. We had definitely more of a complete buffer around Kleinstock Preserve, and that happened also up near Bow in the Clouds, right? So those were some other parcels that got added in as priorities, areas that we felt were really missed in that first NFP protection, NFP overlay district. Then in pretty much the month of August, or at least mid-August through mid-September, we opened it up and presented the blue and gold map to the public and said, hey, we know that the data is not perfect. And we know that, we had to set certain criteria and parameters because of, resource restraints or, not applying the district over the entire city. So check out this map and let us know if we forgot places, if we missed places. Did we get it correct? Did we identify some place on the map that there are really no natural features remaining? And so we put this out and we started getting comments back. We had, let me pull my memo up here. You all got a memo in the agenda packet, right? So the memo gives a little bit of information about the feedback that we had. We had over 160 pins placed on the map. So we had an interactive online map. Folks could place a pin where they felt there was an area that had natural features that was important to them, and perhaps it should be considered to be added to the map. And then they could also place pins where they felt like there were no natural features and a parcel should be removed from the map. We also had the map up for display at City Hall, and we didn't get any paper copies, paper surveys or input returned to us, interestingly. But I know a couple of people had asked, hey, is there a way for me to get hold of a paper map? And so we were able to direct them. So they may have gone into City Hall, looked at the large format map and still submitted. We got a number of email responses as well. So in total, you can see that in terms of the blue, we really added parcels. We kind of filled, I feel like the new recommendation really helps us fill in areas that were not covered before. Certainly Western Michigan University and the BTR Park to the south add a pretty big chunk, because even if they had just a couple of natural features, the way the overlay works is you have to put it onto the entire parcel. And those are just really large parcels. The board did have some discussion about whether that makes sense, because you also saw on the tree canopy layer that, there are parts of campus that are very developed and paved, and, maybe there aren't natural features, but there were enough features where the board felt like strongly that it should remain in the overlay district. And I also mentioned that we do have some limitations with public bodies like universities, like public school districts, county-owned properties, where our zoning standards don't apply. So it's not that these entities would come in front of this board and we'd be able to enforce the NFP rules. But that said, this is kind of a long game when it comes to protecting natural features. And so if at any time some of those parcels or portions of those parcels get sold off or change hands, then that's just providing sort of a hint to future folks that, hey, this was identified as natural features in the past and should be looked at from that perspective. And then the zoning overlay would apply in that instance. So you can see that so around preserves, we've certainly expanded. We're proposing to expand the overlay district. In the Douglas neighborhood, kind of moving south here, we certainly had a lot of wooded and very sloped areas. And so we were able to add some parcels up here for protection. And then also if you switch over sort of the east side of the city, northeast, we're definitely able to fill in some areas around some city public parks and around a nature preserve up there to kind of expand the natural features protection in that area. I had heard comments about, not a lot, but a little bit about the city-owned parcel out here, which does have a very natural feel. It's not probably very intentionally maintained as like a public nature space, but because it's used for a lot of composting and public services type activities, I mean, it's very wooded and has a lot of wetlands and has a lot of natural features worth protecting in that side of the city. And then if you move, I think one of the most dramatic changes is in the southeast corner of the city. There was really nothing down here. It was kind of a forgotten part of the original map. And so all through the Davis Creek corridor, we've been able to pick up parcels that are at least adjacent to water. This was an area where I think we found quite a few parcels where we felt like, hey, I think that's more of a gravel pit, or it's a very industrial used property. And so perhaps it doesn't lend itself to protecting natural features, but because of the waterway, we were able to add in some properties to protect water quality in the future. And then you can see all along Portage Creek, there's just kind of pockets that got added. I think that it sort of helps create and protect a corridor around Portage Creek. So you can see where the blue is proposed to be added there. And then also we have a lot more connectivity with the waterways in the southwest corner of the city, right? So we're seeing kind of all sorts of, and this again hits some residential areas, but we also have a lot of property owned by the Nature Center and other places that are big open green space in this area. And so we're able to pick up some protection down here, definitely around White's Lake and up through Pikes Pond, connected to Kleinstack. And it even connects over to Woods Lake. So there is getting to be this very nice sort of corridor of connectivity that we see throughout the map. Okay. So let me explain a little bit more on this map and as it relates to the public comment that we received. So overall, we had about 146 pins placed on the map for spots that were important to folks that they would recommend adding. And then we had 13 pins placed for removal on the map. Now, I will mention these are not unique, right? In some cases, we saw a lot of pins clustered in the same area. But as far as I'll start with removal because I think that one's a pretty short list, right? We had a recommendation to remove a very commercial parcel along North or Southwest Nidge Avenue that would appear to have no natural features. It does have West Fork Portage Creek that flows under it, so it's not daylighted right now. It is underground, and for that, and it is in the original overlay district. So in that regard, I wouldn't recommend removing that piece. I think it was kind of intentionally put in there because it is along a waterway and has the potential someday to perhaps be something different. We had several parcels all along Stadium Drive here where there's a lot of development. There doesn't appear to be a lot of natural features, but if, once we took a closer look, there is a protected slope or what looks to be probably close to a protected slope throughout there. And so there wasn't really a clear way to remove parcels because they do have sort of the bottom of the slope is very, very much on those parcels. So those are left in as well. There was a property, it was a residential property up near Kleinstuck. So as we kind of identified parcels that were around Kleinstuck, partly as a buffer, but a lot because they just also have natural features, right? Those are not just confined to this squarish parcel here. So there was one though that was not contiguous like we see through here. It was kind of across the street, totally on its own, completely developed. And so that one did feel like an outlier, and that one was the only one that got removed from the map. Of the pins that were dropped for addition, we went through every single one of those, at least the best of our ability. We got a latitude, longitude location for each of those pins. So then we had to go and search out or place them on a map so we could identify what parcel the comment was directed toward. And overall, we saw 19 of those parcels, and I actually think it's a little bit higher because when I actually had IT map it, we started noticing a little extra overlap. But I'd say 19 to 25 of those parcels were already identified in the blue or the gold. So they were already part of the phase 1 or the phase 2 of the map. So I felt like that was indication we're on the right track. 16 parcels we found when they got mapped were not in the boundary of the city. A couple of them are other city-owned parcels outside of the city boundaries. A lot of them were privately owned parcels, recreation areas, things you'd expect are important to people, but our zoning rules won't apply there, so we can't map our map there. 18 pins were in locations that for whatever reason didn't seem to have significant features, or maybe the lot sizes were extremely small, or there was already very substantial development. A couple of them were on K College campus where, you know, it's great open mode green space, but probably not a useful application for the NFP map. A couple of them were very small city parks where you're going to notice there are some city parks that got added to the map, but some of them, parks are protected for that purpose under different laws. The city can't just change or sell a park without having a vote of the people. And so those have their own protection. So if there were no natural features there, or if it was managed as much more of a manicured recreation-based park with, you know, parking lots and playgrounds, I didn't include those in the overlay. So it kind of came down to 47 parcels, and I think that's a couple lower because, like I said, I think there were a couple of those that once we mapped them, we realized they were in the blue or the gold on this map. But, you know, right around 47 parcels that seemed like really good additions. And you can see where those on the map, they're marked in purple here, kind of a hatched purple mark. This was the map as of Friday. And they either were little parcels that seemed left out of maybe a larger area, right? An area that already had blue that maybe we had not quite gotten the delineation correct. There were several areas of the city that got lots of pins. And so I want to cover those with all of you. I put it in the memo, but certainly the area between Portage Creek near this and Stockbridge and Lake Street. I think I wrote John Street on here, but it's Lake and John. If you're familiar with that area, let me zoom in here. I actually have that one delineated. We had a lot of pins in this area. And so the way we put it on the map was these parcels here, we're recommending to be included that are on Lake Street. And then over the weekend, I got a bunch more people who had looked at the map who had further comments. And so I don't think that we really fully picked up the whole area of concern here. Because you can see there are this is the National Wetlands Inventory map. So we do have just a little speck of wetlands here, but the whole system, as you can imagine, it's wooded, it's wet, there's hydric wetland soils here. And so this area has been probably one of the areas that had the most comment that we need to make sure we're protecting this area for natural features. And so what I'm recommending here is these 3 Stockbridge parcels on the south, and then adding the Lake Street parcels as well, because what happens is we already have the overlay on 415. You can see that here. So then it just kind of becomes this whole area of protection. It picks up the NWI wetland. And so we're recommending that kind of this whole area be part of natural features protection. The other area that got a lot of pins was a spot down here, and back here to the map. This is near White's Lake. It's off of, I'm going to forget the street here, Hazel, in that area. It's off of Oakland Drive. It's very near Lakeside Academy, which did get picked up on our map. And I did look into it a little bit more, why this little rectangle got left out. It just happened to not have, it's a little flatter in that area, so I don't think it got picked up for slopes. And then it isn't adjacent to water since the golf course is here. So again, it fits right in here with the character. We had a lot of comments about the sort of contiguous woodland throughout here. So it really makes sense to add that one, and that one is recommended to be included, as you can see from the map. Other comments and areas that we heard a lot from. We heard a lot of people very supportive of areas around Kleinstuck Preserve, and you can see the new overlay district certainly includes a lot of that area. There are a couple of city-owned parks that got added too because of some significant trees and woodlands that are in those areas. One of the comments that I just got today was that it feels like there's a gap over on Arboretum Parkway if we were looking in the Arcadia neighborhood. And so this would be the parcel at 3801 Arboretum Parkway. You can see this parcel, lots of people pinned because it's actually owned by the school district, but there's a wood lot that's adjacent to the property. It's connected as one parcel here. And so folks felt like that was really important to protect. And then people also talked about the trailway that's kind of along Arboretum Parkway. So to make that complete, it makes a lot of sense to just recommend that we add 3801. So then that's just that little missing section here. So we'd have sort of this contiguous connection along this part of the neighborhood and into campus. Next up, oh, I think I missed one. Okay. Next up, we have an area in Winchell neighborhood. So we're right on Parkview Avenue here, west of Woods Lake. The parcel that's in the phase 2 blue recommendation is this part 2700. It's a parcel owned by the city. It's Glen Park, so it's managed as a city park. And there's certainly areas all to the north of here on the other side of Kensington that are all part of the recommended overlay district. So it makes sense. We had quite a few folks from the public say, hey, you know, this just doesn't, this woodland area here and the sort of sloped area doesn't just end at the city boundaries. Instead, we'd recommend a lot of these undeveloped parcels immediately to the east. They're all wooded, undeveloped, and then probably connecting this developed parcel because it has a pretty substantial backyard that's all wooded. And then this part of the parcel as, you know, potential access back here. And this section here made a lot of sense to me when we started taking a closer look at it. At some point, we, you know, need to make a stop point over to the east, or excuse me, to the west. We had a couple of pins dropped on these two properties as well. And at this time, I didn't include those in the recommendation because I felt like, you know, these parcels are developed. The houses are such that they're kind of right in the middle of those parcels. This is one we can kind of talk about for a recommendation, because I just feel like, you know, yeah, at some point you've got to draw that line. So where is that line? So something for us to consider, for the board to consider. But for now, this parcel, again, is in the overlay district, and we're recommending we'd add this whole section of parcels as well. Okay. moving on, if we get up to Kleinstuck Preserve, right? So we're here on the map. This is Kleinstuck, which was included in phase 1. We're including a bunch of the parcels all bordering the preserve in phase 2. There is this tiny sliver. It's hard to see. It is a skinny little sliver that, you know, didn't get picked up because it doesn't have like immediate adjacency. I think there is some strange little protrusion of a parcel that makes this not adjacent. But the public comment was that there is actually some waterway drainage that flows from this parcel onto the Kleinstuck Preserve. I would argue if we're going to include this 2155 Oakland Drive parcel, that it makes sense to fill in the whole sliver, right? So this whole sliver here would be filled in all around. And so staff recommendation is to include 2211 Oakland Drive and 2155 Oakland Drive, so we can fill in that gap. Okay, another area that got a couple of comments. So as of like last week, we probably had one homeowner who contacted us in this area and had said, this is an important area. It was a place that they lived, and in the public comments, you've noticed they do a lot of bird watching, and they threw in they had a list of a lot of the species that they've seen back here. This area it is very connected to kind of this whole stretch along Stadium Drive between Howard and Rambling Road. We did have, here, I'm going to move this for you all. We did have a parcel here that someone recommended that felt like, you know, it's part of a slope system and we should include that. And then upon closer look, so I really wanted to look into this area because then I started hearing that there may be some issues with individual homeowners wanting to fill in. This is a very like steep ravine. You can see kind of Sheffield and Crosswind are higher points. And then we have this very steep kind of ravine that goes back through the homes. It's a lot of parcels though. It's pretty chopped up and they are developed here at the street. So it's one of those sort of more borderline, how does it fit within our criteria? How do we evaluate it? But the slopes are certainly steep. And so I think it's for the board to decide, but it feels like kind of this delineation, if you wanted to get sort of the most steep section here, it is very heavily wooded. You know, these might be the whole chunk of properties that you include. I have to say, as you look up to the sort of northwest, right? So in the bigger map here, it's Aberdeen Drive. And this is kind of all the same slope or sort of an undulating slope here. And it gets very steep on the back of those properties too. These are already developed for residential. I'm less certain of, you know, what is the impact, the threat to future impact to this slope, but it is a substantial slope. And so we could consider as a board, you know, do we grab parcels kind of on the north side of Aberdeen to just sort of fill in and follow the sloped contour here and kind of pick up this area. And another reason why I brought this forward as a kind of a post-Friday recommendation was we did hear from at least one other person who provided some input today, actually, even just talking about the ecological value of this stretch between Howard and Rambling, kind of along Stadium Drive, and how it was sort of a unique and valuable area, again, in terms of ecology for the city. And so that even felt a little bit more compelling to include something like this throughout this stretch. So what does this mean? We certainly had, like I said, a lot of good public feedback and input. We're going to hear a little bit more from the public in a few moments. I'm going to let you guys ask questions, but I wanted to put the recommendation down here clearly. So if you feel, once you listen to public comment, that you still want to move forward with a motion to adopt, you could adopt, you could make a motion to adopt all the blue parcels as presented, and including all the purple parcels as presented, because you've seen that map since Friday. And that if you wanted to go with the recommendations I just laid out here, or we can talk about them kind of slide by slide, are I've kind of laid them out here. So this is that Lake Street Stockbridge wetland area, which seemed very important to the public. We have the missing piece at Arboretum Parkway. We have that sliver along Oakland Drive that is kind of pockets into Kleinstuck Preserve. These are all of those parcels identified on Crosswind, Aberdeen, and Watersworth, plus on the east side, all of Sheffield. So we have those recorded down if the motion is include these parcels or not. And then if the board wanted to go back and include sort of this northeast section of Aberdeen, so this little pocket in here, that is addresses here on Aberdeen Drive. And then anything else we hear from public comment, things to consider. Now, before we go to before I open up to your questions, let me quickly talk about sort of where we go from here and what's being asked of the board today. Big picture to revise. Here, I'm going to stop sharing a moment so we can actually see one another. Hi, Paul. So big picture here to revise the overlay district map and any text amendments that we want to talk about. We need to put that in front of the Plan Commission because it's a zoning code. So per the state statute, it's the Plan Commission that reviews, holds a public hearing, and then makes a recommendation on to City Commission that has the power to adopt and change the zoning code. We wanted to take this interim step to the NFP review board because you all have the knowledge and expertise to kind of lay out the boundaries and think about the criteria to modify the map. And so you're providing a recommendation to the Planning Commission. One important step between what we're doing today and when we eventually get to Plan Commission is that we have to send out public notice to all of the parcels being recommended for a zoning change. And in certain cases, we'll be sending out notice letters even to all of the parcels within 300 feet. So we need to let people know, if they haven't already, through a lot of the press releases and information the city has sent out. I know there's still going to be a lot of people who aren't aware of what we're proposing to do. And so the plan would be, following this meeting, once we get your final feedback, sending out those notice letters. And so we probably likely have to have another meeting. I will say too, in the agenda packet, I had put together a few of the probably more minor adjustments to the text of the NFP standards, because I know we had talked about trying to do something a little more substantial, right? We had talked about all sorts of potential changes to the protected tree list and the recommended tree list, the prohibited plantings list. And I think from what I had heard from the board and feedback we got over the summer, it felt like some of those things maybe we weren't quite ready to change. Like you all wanted to live with and evaluate projects against that code maybe for another year, and we can do that. I mean, I know independently, we all can bring those to the Planning Commission whenever we feel like it. I do know also that there's just going to be some other zoning changes in any parts of the city that the city planner wants to do in the next year. And so that might present us an opportunity, right? We can bring a whole package to the Plan Commission if we choose it. So with that, I want to open it up to questions and thoughts you have on the map as presented, and then we can get into the text amendments, which are on the second page of your staff memo, which again were two additions or amendments to section K, one to section L, which was review bodies and process, and one to section M, which had to do with bonding. And we can talk about, do we want to advance and recommend changes in this minimal way? Do we want to wait and do something more robust in a year? You guys can kind of decide what that looks like. We also have, I will mention, The plan was, if we have a map that we want to approve and recommend up to the Plan Commission, that the next Plan Commission meeting would be, the next one we probably could get on would be November 5th. You do have another NFP meeting before that, but we'll probably have an issue with noticing in time. So there's no hard deadline for that November 5th meeting. It could be December Plan Commission meeting as well. I would just caution that, I know how much time you all have spent on this map amendment, and the map amendment is probably a really important thing to think about moving forward relatively soon, because I did hear in some of the public comments, right, some of these things are rising to people's radar and they're aware of and want to see the overlay district applied to it because they maybe know of a threat or they know of an activity that's happening at a nearby property that they'd like to be able to have some rules set forth on these sites. So that would maybe be the only reason to not, delay it another 6 months or something like that. So with that, I'm going to remind anyone from the public after hearing that presentation, if you have comments that you'd like to leave, you can do that by calling 269-226-6573 and leave your voicemail. I'm going to let the board ask a few questions while we get those comments wrapped up, and then we'll be able to listen to public comment.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamie. That was really thorough, super helpful to know those specific spots too. Just for clarification, if we were to adopt additional areas tonight with sort of procedural steps that you outlined, when would the new areas be effective in the zoning code for any sort of proposed developments? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think it lends itself to that applicability of folks who are throughout the community interested in protection. So again, what if I heard, the board makes a motion to say, let's approve the map in blue, or let's approve the blue and the purple and some combination or all of the other recommendations that you saw on the slideshow, the city could turn around and get that map. We'd like to put that back out to the public, and then we would have to mail notice letters to all of those landowners and let them know what Planning Commission public hearing we'd be putting it on. So again, that might take another month, and then, probably another 4 or 6 weeks to get through the couple of meetings that'll have to happen at City Commission too. So right now, if you had a map you wanted to suggest or recommend up to Planning Commission, we could likely get a brand new published overlay district, at the end of 2020, ready for 2021.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamie. I had all these notes of places I wanted to have a second when you addressed so many of those extra parcels, and that was a huge task with all of those comments. So thank you so much for doing all of that.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, yeah. The Kensington parcels next to Glen Park, I would really like to see both of those included, the ones on the west of Glen Park, because of the slope that comes down from those parcels. Your comment about, well, the houses are in the middle of the property and well, there's still, there you go. Yep, 27, and the one on Parkview too, 2720. The slope as it goes, in fact, your contour, okay, I got different contours, but it shows there's a low point right in the middle of Glen Park. Anyway, both of those houses are part of that slope. They're not built on a flat level plain. It actually crosses their yard from the west and goes down into Glen Park. So I would highly recommend that we put those on as protection for Glen Park. 2627 was Kensington wasn't on there, but I see you got it included on there now. So that's good. That's good. I agree with you too about the Stadium Drive gosh, that guy sent a whole list of properties on Stadium Drive, and no, he didn't want to do this, didn't want. And when I first started looking at them, I thought, yeah, there's probably about half of those that we probably should take. But then I pulled up the contours again, and there is almost an 18-foot slope down from the back of those properties down to, oh shoot, I can't remember the street now, but there's a street behind there that also drops about 4 or 5 foot. So that makes a gully down there, which actually goes into a pretty wet area. So anyway, I agree. I'm sorry to this guy, Rick, but nah, I wouldn't recommend that we take any of those off.
I agree 100%, Paul, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay.
that confirmation, because I felt that same way, right? Just knowing the character of that drive, I thought, or that street, like sort of the same thing, probably half of them. And as I started really zooming in and looking, I couldn't find one that really looked different from the others. And for that reason, I thought we need to just include all of those. I will mention, there was a project, there's a site plan right now that has an addition onto one of the buildings. They're not changing any of the impervious surface. And because most of those lots are all 100% asphalt, the NFP rules aren't going to prohibit someone for doing the sort of minor changes that might have to happen along there once already developed. And it would protect and keep development away from the slope. So I think by leaving them in, again, it wouldn't be a huge hindrance to the businesses operating as they have. And at the same time, it will offer some protection for any sort of major changes in the future that would negatively impact that slope. So it feels like a good compromise to leave those in as well.
Jamie, would you say that if on the updated map, it looks like there's a couple little gaps in there. Would you say that the ones that were taken out of that same Stadium Drive kind of linear stretch are 100% impervious and don't have the sort of top of the slope contained within the parcel? Because I remember when we were investigating that area, I kind of drove in there and said, yeah, it's 100% paved. There's no natural features here, but not having the exact parcel lines and the topography, couldn't see that the toe of the slope was at the south end of a lot of those. So I do still feel that if it is 100% impervious, that it doesn't really make sense to sort of burden those folks. But I think, yeah, if they do have that natural area slope on the south side, that it makes sense.
And Mitch, I think your conclusion there is correct with my recollection too, right? Some of the more, I guess they're considered northern, right? They have the frontage on Stadium, but you can tell there's still blue or gold, orange kind of. Here, I'm gonna share my screen a little bit better so you can see. Let me try that one more time. All of screen 2. Okay. Might need to update here a second. Okay, so you're right. You can see how some of these areas get left off, but it's the slope that the overlay is following, which is kind of this ridge line that, you're right, it touches a lot of the southern portions of these existing lots. And then some of them just happen to be all frontage, and then they don't touch that slope. So then they got plucked out of there also because they had such heavy impervious surface coverage. So I think the way the overlay here, it really helps protect that slope and that ridge line back here, which definitely then changes as we move up to here. We get a lot bigger and more complex kind of slopes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I do feel for the gentleman that sent in the email, but there's also a lot of known water quality issues with Asylum Lake. So I think what natural buffers and filters we do have, we'd be well intentioned to try to preserve those.
And I was also going to mention, Paul, I do appreciate kind of going back to this Kensington area. That's why I wanted to provide the NFP review board for, provide this for your consideration, because many of you know this area well, and we know the limitations of just using data. So if you felt like the boundary here was include these 2 blue parcels, I can change that on the final slide if that's how we want to make the recommendation. I would ask, I'd just ask, is that the line? We have 2,800, which is undeveloped. It looks like its own parcel undeveloped, which oftentimes as a criterion, if a parcel isn't developed, it more often would get included in an overlay district, but you might know a little bit better, Paul, what's located there.
Well, yeah, I saw that too, but it is disjointed from Glen Park. I mean, it's not directly connected to Glen Park. It probably would impact a little bit, but I guess I'm not real excited about putting that one on the protection, but not as much as I am both the 2720 Parkview and the other one, because they do have, to me, they do have a direct connection, not only connection, but an impact on Glen Park. So, yeah,
Okay,
watch closely whatever happens here.
that's good feedback. Okay.
Amy?
Yeah.
That last group you presented, the Crosswind and Sheffield block of Aberdeen. Can you go to that slide again, please?
Yes, sir. And I can pull up the city GIS too if we want to glance at that
Okay.
as well.
I mean, it's pretty evident that there's considerable slope there. You even use the word ravine. I guess my question is, along the adjoining backyards, is that also fairly contiguously wooded?
Yes, I would say
Okay.
that it does. It's kind of that intersection of those 2 natural features that we were looking at. Let me,
Okay, that was my concern. I mean, the slope itself might already be prohibitive for development. However, it's worth protecting the woodland cover there, because if that starts to go, then your slope erosion is more likely to take place. So if it is both wooded and sloped, then I am in favor of including that section.
so can you see my screen now for sharing the map that I just pulled up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is that sloped area. This is the Crosswind Sheffield kind of area back here. And even you can see there's this slope. I want to put topography on here so you can appreciate how close some of these lines get.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, very sloped. And the slope goes, and the NFP, both phase 1 and phase 2 kind of goes up and definitely overlays and grabs parcels in this area, because you can definitely see the very steep and very high slope here.
Yeah.
It changes a little here, but although, back here, that's those parcels along the north side of Aberdeen. And then let me give you a satellite image. So here's where you can see it's quite so that's where really kind of down here, maybe we're getting a little more chopped up with woodland, but this area is quite wooded.
Yes.
Oh, let me not do a summer or not do a fall leaf off, but here. Still not. Okay. Do we want to do public comment, Mitch? I'll let you.
I have one more question real quick. Ashley had passed along some more comments today, and I think our map addresses most of those, except there was one that I wasn't familiar with the location of Skipper's Crossing. So does anyone know where that is and if we've captured it?
Yeah, that's over by just north of the river and kind of over by Bow in the Clouds, I think. So I was looking pretty closely at that earlier, and I do think it captured most of it. But yeah, on the east side, kind of, I think we're West Main and the river like this. But if you type in that word Shipler into, sorry, my dog, into Google, it's a pretty small road that dead ends. So I've had a look at it a couple times, and I think, yeah, I think it captures most of that. Kind of goes from where East Main and Michigan come together over to Nazareth Road.
And what we call Skipper's Landing, which I was curious if it was the same area, is that protrusion, that strange protrusion on the east side of the city that's really would have otherwise been outside of the city boundaries, but it was annexed because it's owned by the city.
Yeah,
And that's the one,
questionable
yeah.
area I was trying to figure out if it was included, just because it's hard without the aerial behind this, but that little tiny blurb to the west of that, right? I think that's what he may have been talking about, but there aren't any other natural like wooded areas in that area that I could think of. So I think that's covered through the map.
Okay, great. And am I right that the rest of the comments that he made, you think are covered? That
Yeah,
was
I think
just from my
that's
quick
mostly,
review. Okay, great. Thank you.
yeah, especially the between Howard and Rambling. I think that was in Jamie's presentation, covered it pretty well too.
Yeah, I had the same questions. Thanks for asking that, Aaron. I had one other just sort of general comment for Jamie. Do you have the sense of looking through the details of where the comments are coming from? Are you able to connect those to whether people that would be in the NFP or are in the NFP in terms of parcel owners are some of the same ones making the comments, since they would be the one that would have the, additional steps for any type of development or expansion projects? Or do you just get the sense that they're people from the general area or neighborhood, or do you not have a feel for that?
It's not perfectly reliable, right? But you're right. What's the pulse out there? And I would say that it's a mix, and probably a pretty solid mix, whereby it was a number of property owners who cared about their own property, and then typically like a bunch of adjacent properties, maybe within a block, because they understand that if their neighbor sells 7 parcels to the south of them, or a developer is able to sort of aggregate those and redevelop, that their property would be under threat. So I definitely felt like a lot of the comments were referring to people's properties, or very close to people's properties, or it was near or on properties that they have access to, probably like public properties. Certainly a lot of comments around Kleinstuck. I think that was maybe the majority of the ones where of that 20 or 24 that were commenting about spots already on the overlay district was around Kleinstuck or in Kleinstuck. And then some comments about public universities and public schools and their properties. So those, would not be owned by the individual, but would certainly have a public component to them. There were some, though, that I had an indication that it was just people from the neighborhood who would not have, land control over those parcels. And that's why I think, regardless of if you're ready to approve a recommendation tonight, or if you want to take another month to talk about this, we probably getting a notice out. I'd like to be able to figure out some way that we can send out that notice so that we can really make sure we're getting the full input of all of those who would be impacted in a rezoning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And it sounds like we'll have further feedback when the 300-foot or the NFP letters go out to those folks who live in those areas or own those areas. And it seems like a lot of the parcels that we added were fairly small, and we had a couple of those in terms of knowing the challenges with small parcels and having to make accommodations. So that might be something we have to think about too, with adding these, but that's really good to hear.
Are we ready for public comment? Oh, Paul.
Yeah, the letter that Ashley forwarded from Dr. Bassett was good, and that the Shippers Crossing and all that. But that really got me thinking too on some of those. I understand what he's talking about. When he talks about corridor, green corridor between Rambling Road and Howard Street and all that. But I think that deserves a lot closer look, but not maybe at this iteration. But I think that's where I would like to talk some more, maybe with Ashley, maybe with the rest of the board, and definitely with Tyler on some of that. So just thought I'd throw that in. I don't want to. Yep, I want to look at that some more. I think that's great, but I've been visited. I've been visiting and looking at and looking up a lot of stuff for this map, and I'm getting mapped out. So anyway, that's it.
Paul, are you thinking that some of the areas that Tyler mentioned aren't on the current map, or just want more time to kind of analyze that part of it?
Well, yeah, I think some of them aren't there, but it's very vague. What is the wildlife corridor from Asylum Lake to Western Michigan University? What is the wildlife corridor from Asylum Lake to Kleinstuck, or to Pikes Pond, or to, because there is a wildlife corridor there, but what is included in that? Where are those stepping stones? I think Jamie and the crew and us too. I mean, we've really pointed out a lot of those, but I think there's more to it than that. Even that's going to deserve some more thought. And when I sober up in the new year, I will definitely focus on that. But until then, I'm pretty much mapped out. So.
Yeah, Paul, I tend to agree with you. We can get into some nuances and all of that, but these additions are such a huge improvement to what we do have now. I would hate to hold it up and be hampered by perfection. Yeah, I don't know.
I have one more comment, and this might be getting down too far into the weeds, but I zoomed into the area around Kleinstuck, and I know there are some right of ways in that area. So right now there's almost some gaps between Kleinstuck and like a proposed addition. And so I don't know if we might want to try to fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, it's astute of you to notice that one, Aaron. There's another one that glares at me on Portage Creek. Right of ways. And I wonder if I think we have Bobby Durkee with us. Bobby, not to put you on the spot, but so right of ways, and then the area on Portage Creek that I'm looking at are there are gaps in our data layer such that it's in the deed, it's owned by one of those adjacent parcels, and then there's a right of way easement in there. And then the one on Portage Creek, it used to be impounded. I mean, there was an impoundment there, so it used to be underwater. And so it really, technically, it's not drawn a boundary, given a parcel number and an owner, because it literally doesn't have one. It used to be underwater. So likely it was owned by the state. Like, there'd be a lot of ownership issues there. Would the state just deed that over to the adjacent property owner? I think for the purpose of NFP, if the adjacent parcel is NFP, if the parent parcel is NFP and there's a right of way, I think we're going to apply that same standard. And that's why I wanted maybe Bobby to pop in here. We're going to apply that same standard over that whole parcel. We don't do split zoning or try to avoid it in the city. So the whole idea is so that when we look at that parcel, we know same rules apply to this entire parcel. It's all zoned to this one zoning district. The overlay applies to the whole thing.
I can research further and confirm, but I'm pretty fairly sure in the event the road is vacated, there's it's in chapter 1 of the zoning code. How do you interpret these exact glitches? And I believe once you vacate a road and then that right away becomes half of each side becomes part of the property. The zoning of that property by default becomes the zone of that adjacent land, to the center point. I'm pretty sure that's outlined specifically in the ordinance, and that would cover that issue. It doesn't really apply to a right of way, but in the event it's vacated, that's what happens. And then creeks are just oddballs where sometimes nobody owns under the water, but other times the property is described to the center line. In those instances, generally the center of the creek is going to be viewed as it would be in the overlay, I think, a little more clearly than a right of way.
Thank you.
You ready for citizen comments, and then board can do any discussion we need to before thinking about a motion?
Yeah, Joe, Joe or Neil, do we have the comments queued up? I'm curious how many we have for public comment under Roman numeral 3.
We have
NFP
4
overlay.
comments. So I will play the first one now.
Hello, my name is Michael Coyle. I live in the Arcadia neighborhood, and I'm vice president of the Arcadia Neighborhood Association. I'm calling about the natural features draft proposal of your map. If you should look at the map up by Linden Grove High School, where it borders the north side of Arcadia neighborhood, the area along the Arboretum Parkway is highlighted for protection. But there is a small area between Linden Grove and the Arboretum Parkway that has been omitted from protection. It's probably just a small oversight, but I wanted to call and make sure that the final version of the map has the Arboretum, the entire Arboretum Parkway connecting to Linden Grove. If there is some reason, technically, why that section hasn't been selected, I'd like to hear it addressed at this evening's meeting. Thank you very much. Bye. Hello.
That's the first comment.
Thanks, Joe. I will respond to that one. In the staff presentation, you noticed that we were including that missing parcel exactly for that reason. It was a gap in our haste last week to review all of the pins. We kind of had Linden Grove pinned and then the Arboretum Trailway, and that center gap was not as well thought out. So that was a useful public comment. And I did get that one in writing, maybe just in the last hour. So I will also reply with the same answer to the commenter.
I will play the next comment then.
Hi, my name is Donna Keller. I am a resident of the city of Kalamazoo. Here is what I would like to say. As I was jotting down some notes in preparation for this public comment period last night, I was being serenaded by a barred owl calling in the woods around my house in the Winchell neighborhood. This is one of the 85 species of birds that I have documented on our property since we moved here in 2002. It is because of the size of the contiguous woods shared by my yard and those of my neighbors that so many species utilize the habitat, some year-round and others during migration in the spring and fall. The property in question involves the yards of homes on the west side of Sheffield Drive, beginning at Winchell Avenue and running north toward Kalamazoo Christian High School, and the yards on Waterworth and Crosswind, where my house is. I think if you look at these properties, you'll notice that it's a substantial forested area with some fairly substantial rolling hills. Additionally, you'll notice that it abuts the existing NFP overlay properties along Stadium Drive, including the Kalamazoo Christian High School campus and others. I would like to see this area of woods added to the NFP overlay map so that this area of the city can remain host to the multitude of species that currently utilize it. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Again, that comment I feel like we've covered in our staff report and have proposed sort of 2 areas that could be considered added to the map per your motion, which would be the what I'll call Crosswind Sheffield sort of southern loop, and then in addition to the Aberdeen sort of northwest spur, sort of that other slope in that direction. One or both of those could be a good option.
My name is Rex Bruggeman. I live at 806 Ellendale in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm calling in particular about property which is part of the Arcadia neighborhood. And it's the area immediately east of Kendall near Solon. That is open, undeveloped space, covered with trees, and has a decent amount of water, standing. I don't know if it has a wetlands aspect, but I'm wondering if that is part of the blue area identified to be added as given NFP protection or not, and if not, why not? Thank you for consideration of my comment.
I'm going to put that one out to the board to help me identify. The caller was talking about Kendall.
It looks like it's near kind of a township cutout as you take M43 west towards the kind of business corridor there. I think Solon goes one way and Kendall goes the other. They're both one-way streets and they kind of lead into Western's campus, the roundabouts at Howard there. And I've noticed that area is very wooded as well, but I can't quite match it up. Maybe you have the city GIS right there to see. I assume the areas he's talking about are in the city limits, but I know it's right near that little cutout to the south of West Main. I don't know if that makes sense or helped you at all.
So it
That's
does.
that's part of the mint farm up there too, which is actually not in the city. It's in the township, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you for helping me with that. I do agree. I think most of that area mentioned by the caller is just north of the city boundary, so not included in the overlay, except I will add that we did in the phase 2 blue map pick up quite a bit of area on that very northern end of campus, essentially, that are not, they were owned, they're just separate parcels, several of which are owned by either WMU or the foundation or the city of Kalamazoo. There were a couple of those, they all got added into the overlay. So I think what we can cover in the overlay is being covered, except I would say, Joe, I'm sorry, I'm going to share my screen, which makes me cut off your sound share, but I think that'll be okay.
Yep, you're good, Jamie.
Thank you. Okay. I will mention, so this is Kendall, right? And Stolen that we just talked about. The blue we did add a bit of blue in here and then the purple or pink as well, but there is sort of this parcel here, which corresponds to this, which is City of Kalamazoo Public Services.
Yeah, there's a well building there that's got the well heads or the well.
Yep, wellfield,
Yep,
wellheads. And so you can see it is a lot of mowed grass there. With some trees though, that definitely connects into the woods kind of around here.
Are the parcels to the south in the sort of phase 2 NFP of the parcel in question there? They are already in.
Yeah,
okay.
so there's this kind of connectivity here through these, that will be through these purple parcels, and then blue. These were pinned a lot for trailway stuff here to connect, but that city parcel didn't end up getting included.
It looks like there's a number of parcels south of that could be included, but maybe they were excluded previously because they were considered too small. And I don't know what the topography there is, but it seems like it could be kind of an analog to the one we just looked at just south of Kalamazoo Christian in that kind of wooded ravine.
Okay, Joel, I just stopped screen share so you can continue with comments.
Hi, this is Hillary Hunt calling. I live within the city limits in Parkview Hills neighborhood, and I left a email comment on the draft NFP overlay, but I just wanted to call in because I've been watching the meeting and I'm really appreciative of the work that you're doing. I'm really happy in particular to see two specific areas get added to the overlay. One is the Western Business and Technology Research Park area. There's really high quality habitat in there, and they've done some really nice pollinator plantings and really nice water features as well. So I'm really happy that any further development and business technology sort of activity will have some subject to some oversight from the NFP board. And then because I live in Parkview Hills, I'm walking, between those two areas all the time. And I'm particularly happy to see there's a small new addition. So it's light blue connector piece that leads from the Western campus to the larger Parkview Hills area. So it leads from the Business and Technology Park southeast. It's kind of like an hourglass shaped small little connector piece there. And I've spent a lot of time in there working on invasives and restoring. And there's some incredible slopes in there as well as some really old native trees. And so I'm really happy that there's connectivity between these different large pieces that's represented in the NFP overlay, because we're learning that connectivity between natural communities is one of the most important things in terms of protecting their longevity. So I'm really happy to see that the board is using the concepts of buffer zones and connectivity strips to maximize the impact that they're having by creating this overlay in the first place. So thank you so much for your work, and thanks for taking my suggestions. Bye.
Joe, if you have any more, you can go ahead with the last one, or that may have been the last one.
That's the last one for this comment period.
Thanks, Hillary.
Mitch, if you want to continue on the agenda, next will be any remaining board discussion.
So I'm kind of hearing from Paul and maybe Ashley that there's sort of a balance between maybe analysis paralysis, wanting to get every little detail right, but also wanting to take this opportunity to kind of do it right when we have the chance. And I'm wondering, just trying to read board sentiment, feel free to comment otherwise, if it might be a good idea. I know that Jamie also mentioned that we might look at some of the texts in the NFP as well in the next month or so and see if there's any revisions that we'd like to have with that. And I think if we did take another month or table the motion to approve the added areas so that we could look at a couple more of those details and maybe confer with Dr. Bassett and see specifically which parcels he's referring to, make sure those are included per Paul's comments. Maybe we can kind of take that opportunity to look at some of the text too, so that when the new NFP layer comes out, we also have, some updated language to go with it, to kind of have those two things coincide. So when the zoning takes place, we have sort of the language we'd like to see too. So I don't know, feel free to let me know if that's kind of the way that folks are thinking, but I'm hearing that we want some additional time, but maybe not a ton. Sounds good, Paul. How about Ashley? You kind of commented on that too, or Kyle?
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Mitch. I like that idea.
Same, okay. Paul, did you have a comment or just?
No, I was gonna start a motion, but go ahead, finish up.
Okay. No, I think that's, Yeah, if I can entertain a motion to table approval of the additional areas while we kind of fine tune some additional parcels and maybe look at the language and try to have those two things coincide a little closer. Could I entertain a motion to table for now?
So move.
Support?
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. And then item F is old business reappointments.
Mitch, before we go into F,
Yeah, Jamie, I had a quick question about the timeline. So should we have a special meeting? Here, sorry, my dog, I'm potty training, about to pee on me. Will we have a special meeting next month to do that? What do you think the timeline for?
yeah, let me bring up a couple of options. Yes, we could call a special meeting. We could do that second Tuesday of the month, which previously the board had set aside and been meeting twice per month. That's no problem if we want to do it then. That would still allow us time to get a little bit more feedback, check in with those folks like Dr. Bassett, where you felt like we needed to just fill in some gaps. It would give us enough time too, as city staff, to send out a notice letter, assuming that we might want to move forward on November 5th, right? So then also I think we'd get maybe more of a cross set, more of a feedback from the actual parcel owners who are having a zoning change, perhaps. I will also mention that we have at least 2, but maybe 3 cases coming forward that I anticipate, that I've been directing them toward the October 27 meeting. So I feel like that meeting could be really full. We have 500 Golden Drive is looking for a variance for the gardens they want to put in. The Bow in the Clouds site plan needs to be approved still. And then we have a project at the city related to odor and a filtration system that they're really wanting to break ground on. And I told them they have to come to this board in October. So all that to say, October might be busy enough to warrant a special meeting if you folks are willing to do so. It also gives us a real short window though, just to get a little bit more of that feedback so we can get a recommendation to the Planning Commission.
So under that kind of scenario, Jamie, would the meeting on the 13th be to kind of review the proposed parcels and additions and language, or would we kind of use that as an opportunity to discuss it and then hoping for a pretty simple approval of it on the 27th?
Yeah, that way I could make sure that we have a map where all the, well, I'll just make the purple, I'll make everything blue that I've been hearing from all of you and the public that needs to be blue. I would also recommend any of those reviews that I had heard some board members wanted to do in terms of some of the specific species on some of the specific tables. I'd love maybe if you could just at least give some, I'd love to know, and maybe the group needs to talk about this right now, but are you ready to move forward with any text amendments? Yes or no? If yes, do you want to focus on just the minimal text amendments? Or do you want to focus on more of the sort of right down to the nitty gritty species and tables and that kind of text amendment?
I'd like to review, just personally, I'd like to review the text amendments a little more, and maybe we can lump that with the 13th meeting and look at the text of what a sort of updated NFP2 text would be with the NFP2 spatial and kind of have those two together. And then I guess just so we would have pretty clear marching orders between now and then, as far as if we're looking through the entire NFP zoning code or just those specific areas, I think would be something good to clarify too.
Uncharacteristically, I would like to wait and on that as well.
Wait until the special meeting or put it off for how long?
Put it off, go over the text and the map together.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think devoting the entire meeting to that would be good.
Just a quick question. What was the rationale with changing the bond from 100,000 to $1 million?
That very rarely would there be any new construction or project that would be less than 100,000. I don't, right?
Okay.
So it would be every.
So it has to be $1 million project before there's a bond requested.
And I had added in there, I don't think we talked about it at our last meeting, but I was suggesting that as a compromise, we should add in the 100 or the $1 million project total investment requires then a bond.
Mm-hmm.
Or in cases where we're going to give some authority to the city planner to be able to require a bond when the city planner ever feels it's appropriate. So then if we did have a strange case where someone is building something with a smaller investment, but feel like there could be a big impact, we could, the city could require a bond. I will say, as I was reviewing our notes from last month and thinking about how we work that, I think there's probably a better way to require a bond based on what natural features could be impacted that is a lot more meaningful than the total dollar investment. So maybe you could all take a look
Jamie,
at that.
Yeah, Jamie, I'm sorry I asked that question. We should talk about it.
So I guess
Bill.
I'll leave it with, think about what's a really useful and meaningful trigger and the way we write that up, because I would just say that it's every single project is pretty much over $100,000 besides maybe someone putting a shed up or maybe a large garage. More importantly, we don't necessarily want to be requiring bonds on every project that feels like they're not really doing anything to impact any natural features. So I want to make sure it's a tool that we have ready to use and that it's triggered exactly when needed.
Okay.
So think about that. And Ellen, you might have some ideas here with some of the projects that you've worked on or in the development world that could help.
Yeah, I'm thinking those very thoughts. So yeah, good topic for some thought.
Okay. Well, I hear that. I know the chair can call a special meeting. I will get that in process so that we can make sure the clerk is noticing it, and we'll get it out on all of the websites and make sure we send all of the information out. And I will try to meet with our IT staff and planning staff to get you a map kind of in the same way. It won't be a ton ahead of that meeting, but we'll get it out so people can look at it.
Great. So can we hold that previous motion, or do we need to do another one?
You're fine.
Okay. Okay, so next item on the agenda would be old business. Are we ready to move on to that one? Great. So approval of a recommendation to reappoint 2 directors for the board for new 3-year terms. Ashley Colwick and Alan Sylvester. Is that right, Jamie?
Yeah, I didn't put a staff report in the agenda packet, but I wanted to just remind everyone that when the board was established a year ago, everyone was sort of split up into staggered terms. And so our first directors in June, I guess, of this year, their 1-year term had expired. So according to the bylaws, they serve until their appointment or reappointment is selected by the mayor and confirmed by the city commission. So what I wanted was a motion to recommend that the mayor and the city commission reappoint those 2 directors. They've added a lot to our to the diversity of the board. They're here specifically to fill some expertise that is written into both the zoning code and our bylaws, which is asking for someone who has experience with development or property management or sort of the consulting design side of things. And then, and so that would be Alan's position. And then Ashley in more of the, trying to decide what category, since I think you fill a couple of them, Ashley, but I think in particular, it was probably some of our woodlands trees category, or maybe no, natural heritage areas.
Natural features, I think.
Got it. Okay. So, you know,
Little
both have
bit of
been great.
everything.
And so good attendance, great contributions. I heard from both of them that they're interested in serving another term on the board, which they're eligible to do so. And so with your motion and recommendation, that will trigger to me, I can, there's a appointment memo that I need to fill out and get to the city clerk, and he works with the mayor to get all of that in action to be formalized.
So moved.
Support.
All right. All in favor to motion to recommend the mayor and city commission to reappoint both Director Colwick and Sylvester to new 3-year terms?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, if there are any other board comments. Doesn't sound like we have any. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks your staff. Thanks, Bobby, and you know, everybody. We're not at the finish line yet, but it's kind of downhill from here. No pun intended. The slope is less. But anyway, thanks everybody. This is really, I feel good about this. I really do.
Yeah, well said, Paul. Hear, hear.
Yep, agreed. Absolutely. All right, any other board comments? Okay, Jamie, any staff updates? No staff updates. And is it true that we heard all of the citizen comments previously per the NFP kind of phase 2, or are there any additional citizen comments at this time?
Joe, did we get any comments under general citizen comments?
Yes, we did, Jamie, and I'll play that one now.
Thank you.
My name is Laurie Holmes. I am a resident, and my message simply is that I'm not getting any video on this at all, just a blank screen and sound.
I will connect with Lori and let her know that we are meeting again. I hope it sounded like she was getting audio, which I feel like is the most important, and see if we can help troubleshoot any of her comments. Or her
And if you
comments.
need me to help, let me know, Jamie.
Will do. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, that's all the citizen comments, right?
Yes.
Okay. With that, I think we can adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Great work.
Thanks.